Is wisdom a side quest or the main pursuit? Can you handle hearing some naughty words today? And what do our attachments say about us? Welcome to my channel at Mishlega. If this is your first visit, what exactly do we do here? We open the book of Proverbs and we read it very slowly, word by word, term by term, in its mother language, Hebrew. And it's this deep and careful examination method that's going to show us that these terms have a lot more meaning than what they seem like on the surface. And it'll help us see just how deep the Bible actually is. So let's look at today's lesson. This is going to be Proverbs 29:3 in the King James English translation. That is, whoso loveth wisdom rejoiceth his father, but he that keepeth company with harlots spendeth his substance. So first glance, what would we take away? Well, that was a lot of F's, but lesson-wise, we'd say that a fool is going to waste his money chasing the wrong kind of women, and that would be an adequate teaching. That's what most people would walk away with, but that is not exactly what we do here. So let's look at this in Hebrew now. In Hebrew, this is Ish ohev chokma yesamach aviv verohe zonot ye'abed hon, and word by word from a concordance, that is, a man who is loving wisdom, he will gladden his father, but a companion, harlots, he will destroy substance. So let's look at this first term, ish. We've covered this term plenty. It's a very common term in the Proverbs. It just simply means a man, and there's no primitive root here. This is a primary term. Many times it gets translated as whoso or whoever does this, and we've talked about it before. Usually there's three different variations of a man that will be used in the Proverbs. The first one is Adam, which means this is a universal truth about any man. The Gever, which is a specific individual man, something about him uniquely, and then this, which is Ish, which this is going to be a character type. And so when you see a proverb begin with ish, it's always going to be followed by the action that makes him this type of person. In this case, this is a man who loves wisdom. And the Proverbs, they always want us to view life in terms of a posture. So in this case, he's loving this, and this is his choice. But it also wants us to see things as person types. And when we do this, this will connect cause and effect. It establishes a certain level of agency, and it says that these outcomes are not accidental. And by consistently choosing this path, you can consistently produce this outcome, which is having wisdom and parental joy. So our next term, ohev, basically means who loves. This is an infinitive participle, so it's an ongoing action, and it's in the cow form, which we've talked about. It's a sort of a unique verb form in the Hebrew language, and it's going to establish, again, what the action produces. And so in this case, it's the man who loves wisdom. And the primitive root here, ahav, means to love. And this infinitive tensing, this is going to establish that this is a consistent action. He does this daily. He does it all the time. And it's saying that this man truly loves wisdom. And the results that it's producing, he doesn't consider this hard work or labor. It's fun for him. It's satisfying. And this is what his appetite is. It's what he's pursuing. And he's doing this because he wants to, not because somebody's making him or he has to. And that's what's going to tie it later on to the idea of parental approval. He loves his father and he does what pleases him. And this is what another thing that the Proverbs themselves will do is they'll set it as life's treasure is to have good relationships and to have this wisdom. And so he has trained his own personal desire inside to enjoy and seek this. Our next word, chokmah, a very, very common term in the Proverbs. In fact, it's the whole purpose of the Proverbs. It means wisdom. And this is the direct object. This is what is loved by the man. And the primitive root for chokmah, it means to have skill, to be proficient in something. And this is the whole purpose of this channel. This is what we're actually trying to acquire, is wisdom. And like we say, it's acing the test in life. It's skipping all the harmful things in life. And the big thing with wisdom is it's always an applied action. It's not just a set of thoughts that a person has. And this is a person who's going to demonstrate that they have a certain level of proficiency, that this is a reliable and repeatable thing, that it's not luck. And this is going to produce stability and excellence over time. And wisdom it means to prefer things over other things. It's as much about what is chosen as what is not. And so a wise person will not be a mixed bag. They're going to choose wise things exclusively in every area of life. And that's what gives them this skill, is that they avoid the errors. And this is what's going to differentiate them from the fool who makes these errors. So our next term, yesamach, and this is a participial phrase, and this is what the man who loves wisdom is creating. And this is in the imperfect tense, so it means this is what's going to occur in the future. It's occurring now, but it's going to consistently occur. And it's in what's known as the PL form, and it establishes what is causing it. And our primitive root here, we've discussed this term a lot lately, is simha. It means to make something joyful, to bring joy, to rejoice, to be glad. And it's going to say that the father is rejoicing because the son made these decisions, and he made them in his heart level. And It's going to connect that wisdom isn't a private thing. It's not just the joy of this one person. It's actually shared with others, the people that you're in relationship with, and it makes life enjoyable for everybody. And with this being in this perpetual tense, it means it keeps it going. It's a constant source. It doesn't run out. It doesn't go away. And the father is joyful because he knows the decisions that this son is making, they're going to yield stability in the future. It's going to give him prosperity. And the PL form, this establishes the mechanism. This is what causes the joy. And so the father's relaxed because he knows that the wisdom guards against both ruin and waste. And this knowledge that his son is safe, this is let the father experience the joy. And that's sometimes overlooked in the Proverbs, is that emotional health, joy, is also a purpose of the Proverbs. They will teach us what make relationships full and rewarding. And it's going to say that wisdom preserves sanity and emotional balance because it reduces chaos. Wisdom takes the strain out of relationships. And so therefore wisdom is always relational. You get a 2-for-1 deal when you choose wisdom. That the father and son have this healthy mutual love being exchanged because he chose wisdom. So our next term, aviv, which means his father. This is also the direct object. This is the one experiencing the gladness. And there's no primitive root here. Av is a primary term. It's a very big term in the Bible, but when you end with the suffix "ev," it means this is what makes it his. So it's his father now, and this is a highly relational term. It's moving the proverb from the man to the father, and it means that this wisdom was not only personally beneficial, it was beneficial for someone else as well. And the idea was that the father is the one that gets to bear the fruit of the moral formation of the child. That the son responded to his teaching. He took in a love of wisdom, and it means that this whole process of formation is relationship building and sustaining, and it's coming back to the one who gave this son life and instruction. So it's completing a circuit, and it started out as instruction when this child was young, but it came back as wisdom when the son was grown up. So now we will pivot to the back half of the proverb. So we're going to establish what is the bad choice. So this first term, verohe, and this means "and the companion," and it's a conjunction. This is, again, in the cow form, which means these are the habitual actions that form the identity. This is how other people are going to view this second man. The primitive root for ro'eh, it means to shepherd and to take your flock out to the pasture, to tend them, to feed them. And idiomatically over time, this idea of shepherding a flock, and it's the idea that you're spending time with these animals, it becomes that you're their companion, you're their associate. So this word can be used in either context. But here, obviously, with people, it means a peer group, a company. And so the second guy, it's saying that he prefers prostitutes. This is who he spends time with. And that's sort of the brilliance of the proverb, is by having this dual meaning of roeh, that shepherding your pasture, this is where you spend your time. This is where you graze. So it's a total environment. It's a complete lifestyle. It's not a place that someone visits occasionally. This is habitual. They are communing together. And this is where he's placing his resources. This is where he's sharing his time. And so shepherding is also about guarding and managing things, which, would be a flock, or in this case, the resources. It's saying that he's mismanaging his wealth, his money. He's feeding the wrong appetite, and he's actually destroying his wealth instead of building it. And he's primarily failing at stewardship because of who he's associating with. And he's normalized this lifestyle through repeating it over and over. So our next term, zonot. And this means harlots or prostitutes, and it's a plural noun. This is who he's associating with, and it comes from a primitive root zonah, which means to commit fornication or to prostitute. And I don't think I need to really explain what prostitutes do. I think we get it. They are compensated for their services. And the Proverbs and the Old Testament in general, they speak very bluntly. They use language that the modern Christian is probably not used to hearing or talking about or thinking about. And the culture that the Proverbs actually comes from, they don't sugarcoat things. They mean what they say. And when we see this term, zonot, the idea of the harlots and the prostitutes, they're a character type as well. And they always represent what runs counter to wisdom. These are the things that are going to lure a man away from making good choices. They're a bad investment. And the harlots are always associated with personal ruin, with moral defilement. And we haven't really done too many other Proverbs about sexual sin, but the Proverbs will treat sexual sin as especially dangerous because it reorders the priorities of the soul. It places these appetites above wisdom and spirituality, which means as an appetite, they require feeding. And over time, this habitual action of deprioritizing wisdom and morals, it will reshape a person into a bad person. And this is a big trap, especially for young men first starting out at life. If nobody's making this investment to teach them, this is a bad idea because it's going to erode their self-control. And in this case, with the idea of prostitution, it's going to turn relationships into a transactional thing and into a lifestyle, to where this is where he spends all of his time and money and energy is pursuing this, and he doesn't form a family, he doesn't think about anybody but himself. And so also many times in the Old Testament, and particularly in the Proverbs, the idea of prostitutes or strange women, they're used symbolically to mean someone that's, seducing you away from following God's ways. And so they're a stand-in for idolatry. And, the idea that you would turn away from the Torah to go and explore another religion. But that is not what it means here. It literally means what it means. So our next term, Ye'abed, and this is a participial phrase as well. It means he will waste, and this is also in the PL form. It's going to describe what the action is going to cause to happen. And so the primitive root for abed is abed. It means to destroy or to perish, and it can mean moral or physical destruction. It's used a lot in the Old Testament. That's actually where sometimes you'll see this word Abaddon. That means, it usually gets translated as the abyss or the bottomless pit or the place of destruction, but it's the same root from this word Abed. And in King James, it translates it as spendeth, but it means more than that. It means to lose everything entirely. This is not a proverb about caution of overspending. This is about blowing everything. This person who's hanging out with the prostitutes, he's unraveling, he's undoing his life. Like, all these resources that he spent on them, they can't be recovered. And that future tensing is very important in this proverb, because it establishes what's going to happen. This is not something that possibly could happen. This is something that will happen. And it's an unavoidable outcome. It's the natural result. And basically what this proverb is saying, that this type of unchecked desire is going to destroy this person's wealth. And the thing that's bringing him pleasure right now, this is actually going to bring him ruin down the line. And it's the thing that's enjoyable will not be enjoyable if his resources run out, which is exactly what he's going to do. And he's going to have nothing to show for it. It's all being destroyed. And so it's saying his lifestyle itself is a black hole. It's a bottomless pit. It's Abaddon. It's being sucked dry. And so our last term is hon, which gets translated as substance. And this is the final direct object. This is what is being wasted. And the primitive root here, it just means simply to be sufficient, to be enough. And it's not a very common word. It's basically only used in Proverbs. There's 18 appearances in the Bible. And then, there's 26 in the Bible. And then 18 of them are in Proverbs. And usually most of the time it gets translated as wealth, but in other places the word for wealth is osher, which means riches. And osher is what is already stored up. So the best way to probably think and understand, well, why would you use hon instead of osher, is hon would be something like net worth, liquidity. And hon is the total potential resources that are available to use, whereas osher is what has already been packed away. And hon is what's going to provide durability to a person's finances. It's not quite like disposable cash, but this is what should be converted to osher if it's being managed properly. And wasting this hon means that no osher can actually ever form. So you will not have riches in the future. And what I'm saying is, this lifestyle is consuming what was meant for tomorrow. The whole thing is extractive. He is inside of an economy that is taking resources away from him, that his vice is draining him. And that subtle insinuation also from the idea that hon means to be enough, it's saying that this stuff actually isn't even satisfying. He's spending his money, and he's not actually ever full. He doesn't ever get to experience peace. His appetite was never fully satisfied, and it was never enough. He didn't know when or how to quit. And it's saying that this desire, it remains. Even though he's indulging it can never be filled. And this is what's causing the depletion and thus the ruin. And it could have been avoided if he had chosen the better things, but he didn't. So now he can't have osher in the future. So now that we understand these words a little bit better, this is where we move to a new section of the video. We call it the closer look. And we're going to look at the elements that are actually played in the proverb, and we're going to look at these component pieces and see how they layer and butt up against each other, and that's what's going to actually allow us to visualize the inner wisdom of the particular proverb up close. And we'll see that Solomon was just this incredible writer, that he was able to express these multiple trains of thought and just condense them into a two-line form. And when we see it like this, it prevents a shallow understanding. We'll see the brilliance is actually in the structure and the phrasing, and understand why each word was chosen. So we will miss that if we read the Proverbs too quickly. Okay, so the first thing that we actually see being compared here is the two different subjects. These are the actors. In the first clause, it's the ish ovev, and then the second one, it's the roev. And so this first clause, this is going to emphasize what is loved, and the second clause is going to emphasize what is habitual. It's going to ask us, what are each of these men attaching themselves to? In the first case, it's wisdom and relationship. And in the second case, it's self-pleasure and by extension, wastefulness. And what the structure is actually saying that the person who's established love, they have these clear goals. They have this discipline to achieve them versus the second person, they're living a completely undisciplined life that's built around mindless consumption. And this is what ultimately destroys them. The big juxtaposition is the idea of the desires, where their heart's at. In the first case, is it under control? Or in the second case, is it controlling him? And because this first man is driven by love and the second man is driven by routine, this is what reinforces and builds their character over time. And so this first person, they're acting like an image bearer of God by loving their father and the wisdom. And the second one is acting like an unsophisticated animal, just blowing everything and doing what feels pleasurable for a second. The next thing that we see being compared in here is the pursuits themselves, as the idea of seeking wisdom or seeking the prostitutes, the harlots. And so this first clause, he's sacrificing his own effort, his time. And the second person, he's just sacrificing his resources. And the first person, he's investing in himself. And the second, he's wasting of himself. And what it's saying is that the appetite of both of these men, they're in an ecosystem itself. And what's actually being revealed is through these actions, this cow form, is what is the inner desire of their hearts, because the repeated actions of a person, that's what actually develops and demonstrates their personal character. And what it's saying is that wisdom is thinking about long-term gain. It learns to discipline itself. It learns to say no to cheap thrills. And foolishness, on the other hand, it indulges short-term pleasure. It doesn't think about the future. It's only thinking about the here and now and what feels good in this moment. Third thing being compared, the verbs and the actions, the idea of making glad versus wasting. And what it's actually saying is that loving wisdom in the long term creates joy, but vice, all it creates is this habit that needs to be fed. And in the first clause, it's saying that the actions are done with others in mind. This is a shared thing that he and the father get to have together. But then the second, he's only thinking about himself. And in the first instance, the relationships, they're personal, they're unique, and they're deep. That's the father. The second, these women, these harlots, they're interchangeable. He doesn't care about any of them. It doesn't matter which one he's with today and which one he's with tomorrow. And what it's saying is that, and then this first clause, they're building memories and attachments. And the second clause, they're building nothing. First clause, they're building these lasting bonds. The second one, they're just spending their money. No bonds are actually forming. And in the first clause, this love that he's built and developed with his father, it's going to remain no matter how much money he has. And then the second one, the moment he runs out of money, this whole thing is over. And then our last one is the impacts. To compare is the idea of the father versus the resources. And so in this first instance, he's investing in relationship, which is free. He's looking at what is immaterial, which is the love that's shared. And he's looking at what is spiritual, the thing that's the long-term reward. And then in the second version, it's extracting his resources. It's not free, it's costly. It's material. He's looking for a good time. It's not immaterial. So he doesn't care about the family love. And it's physical. It's this quick fix that's going to have to be done again and again and again. And because that means there's no long-term reward. And if you choose the second lifestyle, what it's actually saying is that you get nothing in the end. You get no wisdom in your head, you have no money in the bank, and you don't have a joyful dad at home. So hopefully this little closer look has allowed us to see some of these layers in the depth and appreciate the structure itself, the way that it's worded. And we get to witness how these proverbs can operate on several different wavelengths when we read them slowly like this, and we see the skill of the writing and the framing of the topics. But we could have an endless discussion about that, but we must move on. So let's go ahead and summarize. Whoso loveth wisdom rejoiceth his father, but he that keepeth company with harlots spendeth his substance. Translation, I'll give it 10 out of 10. There's that little slight discrepancy. I think that spend versus destroy is a little, it's not enough to dock it, but it is a slight difference. So first takeaway, wisdom is a constant pursuit. You need to develop a love for acquiring it, and this will include tossing anything as unwise. Wisdom thinks relationally. Second one, sexual desire is a vulnerability that's very easy to exploit in young men. And lots of people make lots of money by taking advantage of this hardwired weakness that people have. And a wise man is going to understand that this challenge exists, and you have to proactively guard your heart against it so that you don't choose it. And then the last one is the habitual pursuit of pleasure of any kind. It doesn't have to necessarily be this stuff, but it's going to divert resources away from your wealth accumulation. And if it's bad enough and indulged too much, it's actually going to impoverish you. Okay, so next section of the video is what we call the dad talk. And the dad talk, this is going to be, just the basic surface understanding of this proverb, but more than anything, it's fatherly advice. It's where you can take the wisdom that's in this proverb and immediately begin applying it in your life. Just put it in your toolkit, and you'll instantly be a wiser person if you begin living life on those principles. So reading this proverb, it seems like it's about a dad giving advice to his son about bachelorhood. What is that young early life like before you're established? And so the first thing you're going to want to do is develop a love of wisdom. Your trajectory is going to be better in life depending on the stage in which you discover wisdom. So most of us, we don't discover it in our youth. We make a lot of mistakes. We're hard-headed. We have to learn the hard way. And then maybe around 30, 40, even 50, we start figuring out what we were doing wrong. But man, if you can get it right from the word go and develop a love of wisdom, in your teenage years and in your early 20s, you're going to avoid all these crazy mistakes. And it doesn't have to be like chasing prostitutes or anything, but just in general, is wisdom will set you up for better future events. And the whole idea also is that wisdom is relational. It keeps every part of your life running well because you're in good standing with everybody. You're not making these tremendous errors that cause things to go off the rails. Second one is the obvious thing is this was a proverb that discussed very heavily the idea, the concept of lust. And in ancient Israel, there was pretty much only one way. It was like, you'd have the flop house, that the men would go in and out of. And modern day, I guess that those things still exist, but that's not how most men are going to indulge their lust. In the information age, it's going to be digital. People are going to look at this type of material online, and just stay away from it. You don't even want to develop an interest or a desire for that, because like the proverb said, it's habitual, is that this is something that grows and builds over time that has to be indulged constantly. And that's how so many men find themselves addicted to this stuff, is it's just this constant habitual routine. And another version of this is serial dating, not having any sort of long-term plans. And that's not quite prostitution, but, the same thing can happen in your head, is that, you at a certain point, you stop actually investing in who you're in these relationships with. And it's very easy to move on. And next thing you know, you've been with everybody in town. And all of this stuff is very destructive. And as a young man, you have to learn how to master this part of your life. And that kind of leads to the third part of the dad talk, which is just planning in general. Is most people, again, they don't start thinking about their future or long-term consequences till they've already put quite a few miles on their odometer, so to speak. And the big thing is when you're young, you start making some money, and for the first time in your life, you can really go out and pursue what your heart desires. You can buy the things you want, and it's real easy to get locked into a cycle of get paid and blow it, get paid and blow it, get paid and blow it. And to think that the whole purpose of life is just having fun in the moment. And the young men that learn earlier not to do that, not to live that way, they end up set up way better down the line. And so as soon as you can get that developed as your mindset, the better off you'll be. Okay, and so the next part of the video, what we do is what we call the lev talk. The lev is the Hebrew word for the heart, and we've discussed it quite a bit, is that from the Hebrew wisdom culture, the lev controls so many other things. In the Western mind, we think that the brain controls the thoughts and the heart controls the emotions, but the culture that these proverbs actually come out of, it assigns all of these things to the heart. The heart manages the inner self. It's mostly responsible for governing, the body and the spirit, but also its own desires and everything else. So the lev controls the emotions, the thoughts, the personal discipline, the personal will, the determination. But the lev is also where desire and appetite is governed. And we often use this image of this parent trying to control two things at one time. You've got this dog on the leash on one hand and this little child on the other, and they're always pursuing different things. And so we haven't really done so much on the idea of the basar, the flesh, the one that we depict as the dog. And the main reason that we depict it this way is much like a dog can be trained, but only to a certain point. It's still going to have certain impulses and instincts. And the big thing is that you can't reason with the dog. You can't explain why. So the dog can only understand reward and punishment and control, but he's always going to have these impulses, and the second you take him off that leash or you stop exercising restraint, he's going to go back to his base self and go pursue and chase base things, just like an animal. And the idea is that if we allow the basar to run unchecked, it's always going to gravitate to whatever feels good, the flesh, and it's going to avoid things that are difficult or that require effort. And If you don't have a strategy or take this seriously, your flesh is going to pursue everything except wisdom. It has no interest in wisdom. The basar doesn't care about it. And the idea is that, your sex drive, it's normal, it's healthy, it's what keeps the species going, and it's what brings men and women together so that they can form family and have these deep bonds. But it's also a vulnerability, and it's very easy to exploit this in young men. And we got an entire culture that's built around taking advantage of this. And if you get interested in pornography and any of these type of sex work, you need to understand, number one, almost every woman involved in this, it was not voluntary. They've been trafficked. They have been abused. They're hooked on drugs. Someone has broken them. And the pimps, the people who produce these films, the people who distribute these films, they're predators. And we've seen a lot of this stuff that's been brought to light because of this Jeffrey Epstein situation. But I think that people need to understand that this is not harmless entertainment. There are actual victims, and when you participate in this economy, you are guaranteeing the continual victimization of women. And basically, the more that you involve yourself in consuming this stuff, it devalues the soul of the people involved. It erases their humanity, but the consumer themselves, they're also being preyed upon. And that's the illusion that this stuff is free and anonymous. It's not. It comes with cost. And the person who does this as a habit, as a routine, they're rewiring their entire brain. Every part of their pleasure centers, it's being reshaped day after day, video after video, and these neural pathways, they're being hardened, and your dopamine receptors are actually being burned out. We don't know so much about this because a lot of people don't want to invest in deep and further studies, but the little bit that we do know is that this stuff is so damaging. I mean, this stuff it's worse than crack and drugs, and it damages people's ability to form these real bonds. And the main reason why is because it divorces intimacy and desire. It makes it a commodity. And the person who spends a lot of time on this stuff, their whole mind becomes screwed up. They only see these women as objects. And the same thing, kind of what we alluded to in the dad talk, is it can happen if you have a lot of sexual partners just in general. It teaches the person to withdraw and isolate. And it's the number one thing destroying young men right now, but we can't talk about it because it makes everybody uncomfortable. And, it's as it said, Abaddon, it's a black hole. It's a dark abyss. And the only real way to avoid that is for a young man to develop an aversion to it in his heart. What the Bible says, loving what God loves and hating what God hates. And you have to do this at the love level. You have to determine, I don't want any part of this. And developing a love for wisdom and relational living is key. This is what's going to keep your heart away from gravitating in that way, just like in this proverb. And that's what this whole proverb was about orientation. It's developing healthy preferences and encouraging them and feeding them. And that's what this lev, it has this very deep responsibility to keep the basar under wraps so that the spirit itself can mature under the heart's direction. And none of that's going to happen if the flesh is constantly being indulged. That means the heart can't do its job, and every part of the person's soul suffers, including their spirit. And in wisdom, it's more than just what you do, it's what you love. And this is what's going to keep us away from disordered lives and folly. This is our chief enemy. This is what the whole purpose of this channel, the whole purpose of the Proverbs, the Mishle, is so that we will choose wisdom over folly. All right. And so where we end out is what we call the Ruach talk. So the lev was the Hebrew word for the heart. Well, the Ruach, this is the word for the spirit. And this is the deepest part of ourselves. And so when we look at the proverb from the angle of the Ruach, we're looking for deep symbolism. We're looking for where's there symmetry between the Old and the New Testament? Where do we see God in this? But in particular, where do we see Jesus in this? Do we see something about the way that he lived his life? Do we see something about the way that he taught? Where's Jesus in the proverb? And so my first instinct when I was looking at this was, throughout the Old Testament, the idea of prostitution is always symbolic of every time Israel would leave God's ways and abandon the Torah and start chasing, the ways of their neighbors. And the obvious thing would be like, well, let's look at symbolically, is this, what are the religions of the modern day? What are the philosophies? What are the things that would pull us away from God in the modern day? But I didn't really see Jesus in that message. And I'm not trying to force fit him in there, but it's like, I always want to know, where is Yeshua speaking to my spirit? Where do I see him in the proverb? And I didn't see him at first. And the whole thing with the Proverbs is they're this excellent source of wisdom. They give us these very reliable predictor of patterns. They establish cause and effect, what is good and what is bad. And they tell us how life works. They tell us what we can expect. And this incredibly logical structure works for our minds because it all adds up. It's transactional. 2 + 2 = 4. And So because of that, the Proverbs are this excellent model for life. But the Proverbs tell us nothing about grace generally, and that's one of God's core character traits. And so grace is this thing that actually, it kind of upsets the Proverbs because there's nothing methodical or mathematical or reasoned about grace. And grace produces results that don't add up. And that's when I started to see Jesus in this proverb. And a humongous part of why Jesus was misunderstood in his time was because of the company that he kept. He hung out with sinners and tax collectors, and yes, harlots. In fact, that was one of the most common accusations of why he couldn't be seen as the Messiah. The religious, the Pharisees, they didn't see Jesus as holy because someone who is clean should not be among the unclean. Why was Jesus not keeping his distance the way that other holy religious men did? And all the prophecies would say that the Messiah is going to come in this righteous judgment. And so for them, it was disqualifying that Jesus would associate with these people, that he would be their Roev. So I guess, do you see where I'm going with this? And the Proverbs, they make sense to us, but grace doesn't. Jesus, in much the same way, is confusing to them and us. So why would he touch the unclean? Why would he invest in the sinner, the prostitute? Why would he mess around with the man who visited the prostitutes? And the reality is, if we're looking at this logically, if we're looking at this rationally, humanity, we're bad investment. There's no real payoff. Transactionally, none of this makes sense. It looks wasteful. It looks like abed hon. And the Bible tells us we were bought with a cost. It wasn't free. It cost Jesus his life. The one who knew no sin, yet became sin for us. And from the outside, from any angle you're looking at this is a bad purchase. It makes no sense. So you have to understand three things. Like how does this work? Well, you have to understand, number one, what love is. Number two, what brings joy to the Father. And number three, more than anything else, how much he's willing to pay. And that's when we actually start to see a little bit of Jesus hidden away in this proverb, is Jesus is where grace and truth meet. And, he's the one who redeems us. And he receives less in return than what he gives. And if it saves somebody who would otherwise perish, this idea of abed, it means that much to him that he's willing to overpay. It's not wasteful from his point of view. And that's how we know that God is loving, because he overpays. He doesn't want it to add up. He doesn't want it to be transactional. That's where we see that Jesus, he's the mindful son, obedient to the Father. He's the suffering servant, that he brings joy to his Father, much like this one, where the first son chooses wisdom. Well, he's redeeming the lost. And that's where I want to come back to this meaning of this word roev, that seeing Jesus as the roev, the one hand, that means the shepherd. He's the shepherd of the sinful. And it's a different thing to see him in that form as the shepherd rather than the patron. And Jesus calls himself the shepherd. And that's always the invitation when we study the Bible itself and the gospel, is this invitation to know him as the good shepherd, the one who knows his flock by name, who lays his life down for them, and the ones who know and hear his voice. And then we can come back to the other meaning of roev, companion, his friend. He tells us that when we do things his Father's way, that's where we graduate from being a servant and we become his friend. And that is really the whole purpose of this channel, is that we can attest that there's abundant life that comes from knowing him in this way, to know him in these three roles: friend, shepherd, and redeemer. And I think that's a good spot to stop. I hope you enjoyed the message and got a little bit out of it. The world's a dark place. It absolutely requires the gospel to go out and light the way. And it's also a foolish place. Lots of people making lots of dumb decisions, and wisdom would definitely help lead them away from it. So when the Mishle go out, it helps point people towards where both things are going to show: the salvation message of Jesus and the wisdom of the Mishle themselves. And the real easy evangelism is just to let someone know that this channel exists, and that the Word of God is opened faithfully and consistently and engaged with in a real way. And so please like and subscribe. Let someone know we exist. And if there's a proverb that you want to see broken down in this long form way, you can email me, that mishleiguy@gmail.com, ThatMishleiGuy@gmail.com, and we will put it in the queue and get around to it. We often compare it to life as this big test, and God wants us to ace the test, so he gives us the answers ahead of time. That's the Mishle, and when we share, that's helping someone else pass their test. So life is very painful if you live in folly. You'll waste all your resources if you go around chasing the wrong things. And God's word is there to keep us away from the path. And you'll continue to make mistakes, but if you listen to Lady Wisdom's voice today, learning a love of wisdom will keep you away from all that. And it no longer has to be these ones. So shalom, shalom.